So, picking up where we left off, last class, we had a program that I'm going to just code up in Excel. So I'll call it Max 5 is an Excel spreadsheet. And I'll open this up. So remember, a program, what we talked about last class was a program is a way for the person using the program to input some data, then a sequence of its steps get run. If that sequence gets run in your head, the program's running in your head. If it gets run on a computer, it's a computer program. But a sequence of steps get run, and then an answer is presented to somebody. So if we wanted to program an Excel spreadsheet to solve the problem from last week, we would do something like this. We would have, what do we have, 5 inputs. Input 1. So I'm just going to put a label so the person who is running our program could, would know where to input their data. So I'll say input 1, input 2. So I'm just putting in labels right now. Usually when you create a program, you want the person using it to know how to input their data. And then we'll let these 5 boxes be the locations where they put their input in. So maybe we'll change the color of that. Pick yellow. Maybe I'll draw a box around them so that they would know where to put their data. Okay, so this will be for our program. These will be the 5 boxes they will put their inputs in. And our program, we said last week, we're trying to keep it simple, was they'll give us 5 inputs and we'll tell them which is the largest of the 5 inputs they gave us. So we had a line of code last time that said whatever their first input is, that's equal to what we called a variable called max. Right? So let's do this. I'll put a label on top of here that says max, and I'll say that this box is equal to this box. Right? That's kind of what we wrote on the board last time. So we basically said that whatever a person types into input 1, we're going to remember that. Remember the way the program read last time? We had 5 boxes on the whiteboard. We looked at the first one and we just remembered it. Then we looked at the second one and we said if that's bigger than all the things we've seen so far, then we'll remember that one instead. Okay? So the first one says input box 1 is the max. The next box does what? The next box says if this box, if the biggest number we've seen so far, if the new number is bigger than the biggest number we've seen so far, then let's remember the new number. Otherwise, let's remember the biggest thing we've seen so far. So we can put a number in here. I think we had 13 was our first number last time, and 21 was our second number.
19.
What's that?
19. 19 was in between.
Does it really matter?
I just wanted it to follow the other example, but okay. So, yeah, I think it was 21. Then I went 19 and 20. So now I want this box to be whatever is the biggest of this number and this number, because this number represents the biggest thing we've seen so far, and this represents the new number. So how can we program that? It's kind of like what we wrote on the board last time. You do say if in Excel's programming language. You say if, and with an open paren, you can say if you. Now, last time we gave names to all our variables. All our boxes we gave a name. In Excel, every box already has a name. It's really the address. It's the D and the 3. So by definition, every variable already has a name. So we can just use its name, and we can click on this box. If this box, C3, is bigger than this box. Now when we talked about the programming language BASIC, we had to type in the word then, right? If C3 is bigger than D2, we wrote in the programming language BASIC, we wrote THEN, and then we said what to do if that is true. In Excel, we can use a comma. So it doesn't look as much like English as BASIC, but it requires less typing. Comma is 1 character, then it's 4 characters. If you had to do this 10,000 times, it's easier to type 10,000 commas than type THEN 10,000 times. So if that's the case, then this box should equal the new number. So basically I'm saying, if this box is bigger than this box, then I want this box to equal the value in this box. And then if that's not true, I can do another comma. So we can basically say what our test is, what happens if it's true, and what happens if it's false. So we can put in another comma, and then click on this box. And then we have to say close paren, because that's the programming language inside Excel, that's their syntax. So if we hit enter here, we now have this box. This box will equal whatever is bigger out of this box and this box. Right? That's what we programmed that box to be. So all we need to do is do that same thing 3 more times. Right? And remember last class we wrote out if B is bigger than max, then B becomes max. And then we said if C is bigger than max, C becomes the new max. So in Excel, one thing that's good is you can take a box and then just copy it. And the formula will get copied with it. So if I take this box and I say copy and just put it on these next 3 boxes and hit paste, the formula got copied everywhere. So for example, this box is equal to whatever is bigger out of this box and this box. So it's these 2 will get written here. This box is equal to whatever bigger out of this box and this box. So I think the numbers we used last time were, I think we used 19, 20, and 35. So, and maybe what I can do, just to highlight what's the input and what's the output, I'll give this box a color. I'll make that blue. Light blue, dark blue. So what I've basically done here is I said, we have 5 inputs. You can randomly put in any number if you want here. Down this column, I'm remembering the biggest number I've seen so far. Every one of these boxes is programmed to be the bigger number of this number and this number. So when I finally get to the bottom, whichever one of these is the biggest one, that'll show up at the bottom. So we can now say that we programmed this Excel spreadsheet to take 5 inputs and tell us as the output which one is the biggest number. Right? And you've probably done something like this in your, what, IT 200 class? Or 100? 200? Okay. Okay, so that's so you're using the Excel spreadsheet, which can then connect to the processor on your computer and perform this computation, then bring the answer back. Okay. So I can save this if you want to look at it later. Okay. But the idea is basically that any program is going to ask the user for some information, run a sequence of steps, perform some computation, and then tell you the result. So in Excel, boxes are the input and some boxes are the output. And you can program other boxes to do the computation. So what we'd like to do is we'd like to have web pages Okay, so what what we'd like to focus on is writing programs that, for now, we'll focus on where the input is asked in a web page. The program then runs, figures out what the result is, and then displays the result back on the web page. Later on, we'll change this to the input could come from the web page and be written somewhere for later on. The input could come from somewhere from later on and displayed back on a web page. You know, like, so for example, if you create a web page, a website that creates accounts for people, you could have one web page that signs people up. And they would join your website, they'd give you an email address and a password and answer some questions, and they would hit a button that runs your program. Your program will copy their data into maybe some database, and that'll be the end of the program. Then you could come back tomorrow and they could log back in, and we'll read from the database to see if their password is correct. So where the data comes from as your input and where the data goes to doesn't always have to be the web page. It could be something else. But I happen to have created a web page that asks, so it's just the same thing we just did in the Excel spreadsheet, same exact logic. But now I'm going to hit a button and the result is going to be the answer will come out. So when you go to this web page, when you bring up a web page, you can view its source. This is the HTML that ran that web page. And what I'm now doing is I'm using a programming language, a different programming language. So we've talked about BASIC and we've now talked about, there's an embedded language in Excel. But this is now, I'm using a programming language, it's a web-based programming language called JavaScript. So again, it's another way to type in that same logic, the logic that says, well, I'll go over this in a second, but what we want to do is we want to have our web page, display 5 inputs and then something that makes the program run, and then when the program runs it says here's the answer. Okay, so you guys are familiar with forms, right? From IT 250 in a web page, how to create a form. Did that come up in your class? If it didn't, that's okay. What's that? To create a form, but does the form ask the person questions? Like, is it a place to fill in the answer?
Yeah.
Okay, and then when you answer the questions, what happens?
It would just be limited sometimes depending on how you set up. It would just be limited responses that the person would give you. I just did it like in a Word document. I never did it for a website.
Okay. Okay, so just kind of briefly, on a web page, you can create a form. So here's the start of the form. I wanted this to be as simple as possible, so the whole web page would appear on one screen. So that's why the web page doesn't look too nice. There's no fancy colors or anything like that. But basically, I've created a form. So a form is a section on a web page where you can ask a question. So for example, if I bring up Facebook. This right here is a form. This, not the whole web page, and actually this is the second form. But any section of a web page that could ask a person a question and then maybe has a button that you hit. Well, the button means I'm going to take these answers and do something with it. This button means that I'm going to take these answers and I'm going to run a program with it. So a section of a web page that asks questions and receives answers is called a form. So this form, so it's kind of like if you apply for a job, you fill out an application form, so some form to answer questions. So this form is going to have 5 input numbers. I'm going to give each one of them a unique name, so this is no longer like Excel, where there's a separate box for every variable. I now have to give them names, so we could then run our program with it. So I'm going to take 5 inputs, input 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and then I have a button. I added a button, and the value on the button says calculate max, so that's what will appear on the button. This one. So it says calculate max, that's the button. And then when I hit that button, what will happen is, on click, don't worry if this stuff doesn't make sense to you. Eventually this will all become second nature to you. On click, it's going to run a program called calculate max. And the input to that program is going to be this .form. So it's basically all the results, all of the information the person typed into this form. So now the question is, we have the form, where is the program? And the way the JavaScript programming language works is, you actually put the program into your web page. So we can put in a tag. You know how from your HTML class you had tags like HTML and it ended with /HTML? Right, remember you had tags and then the header started here and ended here. The body started here and ended here. So different sections of your web page start and stop at different points. The form starts here, ends here, so the slash always means the end of it. So now we have a new tag, and the tag is script. We start a script here, and we end a script here. So a script is like a program. A script basically is a sequence of steps you follow. And now what we can do is we can put something in here. We can write a mini program in here, which will run if somebody ever says for it to run. And we've set up this button. We set up this button that if anyone clicks on it, will run that program. So what does the program do? It's the same exact program we talked about last class and we just did with the Excel spreadsheet. We take the form's input 1's value and we remember it in a variable called max. Like I say, don't worry if this stuff seems a little confusing at first. It'll all become second nature pretty soon. Then we say if the second input is bigger than max, then let's remember the second input. Otherwise, let's not remember it. So we don't need to put the word then here, T-H-E-N, like we do in the programming language BASIC, because this programming language assumes that this is true, the very next thing is what you want to happen. Then we said, I don't know why this is indented like this, but then we said if the third input is bigger than max, then remember the third one. Otherwise, just we'll leave max the way it was. If the fourth input is bigger than the biggest thing we've seen so far, then remember the fourth one instead. And then if the fifth one is bigger than the max, we'll remember the fifth one. Now I did this alert thing. There's probably more graceful ways to give an answer, but you can alert something usually means something went wrong, so I just decided to use an alert pop-up window to tell us what the max is. So if you remember last class, we had 5 lines of code. We said, remember the first one, if the second one beats it, remember that, if the third one beats it, remember that, if the fourth one beats it, and so on, and then the last line was to just say what the answer is. So this web page will pop up kind of like an emergency window and display the answer. So if we use the same numbers as last time, which was 13, 21, 19, 20, and 35, and then hit the button, this kind of, you ever get these things pop up to tell you like something's wrong on a web page? So it's basically, I made it pop up, so when you do an alert, it's an alert, but whatever you tell it to say. We could put anything we want here. But I'm basically saying that's the answer. So I could get rid of this. I could change these numbers just so you know I'm not. Anyone have any numbers you want me to put in? Just so you know it's the program's actually running. Anyone have a number for Well, right now, 21 would be the biggest. Maybe I'll make this 7. So now what's the biggest number? Now it should be 20,
20.
right? 20 should be the biggest input. And of all of these, I'm going to calculate what the maximum number is and display it like an alert. So this should now be, what? That's not good. Program's not running right. Oh, you know, I should refresh. I need to. Let me reload this page. Now, what did I have? 13. Okay, this is a surprise. Let me.
It's doing the lowest.
Yeah, it's returning the lowest now. What? Anyone know why? I mean, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but this should be, there's something wrong with the program. It's returning the lowest number. We're reading 1. If 2 is bigger, we'll take 2. If 3 is bigger, we'll take
We'll
3.
take 3.
4 is and then we're displaying it. Well,
It's right now.
I don't know if it's working, but.
It's on 13.
Change input 4, see if it gives you back input 4.
What's that?
It looks like it's just giving you back input 5, whatever your input 5 is.
Oh, maybe it's only considering what's new, right? No.
Put it all new numbers.
What's that?
Put it all new numbers.
Yeah, I thought we did that, but, all right. Let me do this.
1, 2, 3.
11. Okay. Now, what if we did it the other way around? Yeah. It must, I'll have to take a second look at that. I wanted to keep it as simple as possible, but the code looks okay. The only thing is that this line indented, but that shouldn't change anything. Okay, but anyway, you get the idea of what the code's trying to do at least. So it's basically, again, every program is going to take some inputs, going to perform some type of computation, and then somehow display the results. And sometimes the results, like I say, is going to be just to write data into a database for later on. But, so from here, we could take the person's email address and password and pass it into this code, and then this code could just save it somewhere. That could be something we'll do shortly in a class or two from now. Okay, so another way we could do the same thing is to use a different programming language. And the last example of programming language I'll do is the same version I wrote for using a programming language called PHP. So it's basically the same idea. We have 5 inputs, and I put a button on the screen, and then I'm going to say the max number is, and the max number should show up here. So now I'll explain why this is true, but I can't do a view source and show you the code. This is a concept. I'll explain this in a second, but if I'll show you the source code that's showing up on the screen is this. Okay. So it's a similar web page. We're using the programming language PHP here. And what I've done here is I have a form. Right, the form starts here, the form ends here. And I'm putting a submit button. And when the submit button is hit, a program's going to run. And the program that's going to run is actually, I've named it the same name as this file. So what it basically means is that this web page will just show up again. Now, it's interesting about PHP. If you remember, we said this originally stood for personal home page, but then it now stands for personal home page hypertext preprocessor. But again, it's just like JavaScript. It's another tag that we can put inside our web page. So the way you start a PHP block is to say less than question mark PHP, and then it closes by saying question mark the greater than sign. And it gives us an opportunity to write code, computer code. Again, same idea. We have to somehow get the inputs, so don't worry about this syntax. You could always just look it up on Google. You don't have to memorize how you get the inputs and how to display the outputs. You just want to kind of know what the steps are in programming. So we get our 5 inputs, our input 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then we run, it's the same code again. And it's almost line for line, just like the JavaScript programming language. We don't have to put the word then in, like we do in BASIC. And so what we end up doing is we say input 1 is equal to max. If input 2 is bigger than max, then remember input 2 is max. If input 3 is bigger than max, remember input 3 is max. Same thing, we do it for 5 lines. And then we print out the maximum number is whatever the value of max is. Now the programming language PHP and another programming language Perl require us that every time we go to reserve a name for a piece of storage, to tell the difference between whether or not we're talking about a word in English or a location for a piece of storage, we put a $sign before it. So anytime you put a $sign before something, the PHP compiler will know that that means this is a storage location. So we store the 5 inputs from the form into storage locations. We run the 5 steps of the program, which we're now kind of getting sick of writing over and over. But the logic is just go through the 5 numbers and remember the biggest one. And then we just go and print it out. So this web page looks like this. And now if I put the numbers in, 13, 21, 19, 20, and 35. If I click this, what ended up happening is we took the 5 inputs, ran through the program that figured out what the biggest number is, and then sent the results back to this same web page. So the page came back up and displayed the 35 and also cleared out the inputs for another round of inputs. So hopefully if I change the numbers, it'll still tell us what the biggest number is. So let me just randomly put some numbers in. Okay, so what should the answer be? It should be 854, right? Okay, so this one worked. Okay. Now, there's one difference between JavaScript and PHP. So now we're going to talk about languages like JavaScript and languages like PHP. And if I go to do view source, If I go to view the source for this web page, what would you expect to see? You'd expect to see the code that I just showed you, right? Right? So when we did the JavaScript one, you saw the entire file. When we do the view source on this web page, it looks different. Does anyone notice what's different about it? Remember, the page that put this up had a form and then a big 10-line program. Remember?
No PHP program.
What's that?
There was PHP, but
Yeah, there was a whole big block of PHP stuff. There was, where's the code? This is the code. This is the web page we're looking at. Here's the form, and then there's this block that says PHP down to PHP, and there's like 10, 11 lines here that perform the whole computation. But it's not there anymore. When we look at it from,
view
when we
source.
do view source, which is the web page that came to us, that whole 10, 11 lines is gone. And it was replaced with this one line. The maximum number is 854. Right? So does that make, I'm not saying does it make sense that that happens, but can you see that that's what happened? Okay. So in the JavaScript case, the form plus the program arrived to the person looking at the web page. In the PHP case, the program is not here. It was, the entire program was replaced with this one line. So, again, if I go to, if I open this up, this entire block from here down to here was removed. And the line, the maximum number is 854, whatever it was, that was replaced. So this whole block was removed and that one line was replaced. That was not the case in the JavaScript example. So I just want to cover why that's the case. And I think the best way to do that is on the blackboard. So let me just explain why this is true. And hopefully it'll make sense when so I just want to explain the difference between, so these are two very important differences why this happened. When you are on a computer and you're going out to Facebook, that's your computer, right? There's your keyboard, and that's your screen. You connect to the internet. And you send a message saying you want to go to Facebook. So you type in www, you type in something like this. You say http://. That means you want to connect to another machine and you want a web page to come back to you. And then you say www.facebook.com. Okay? You hit enter, it goes through the internet, it finds this machine out in California, and a web page comes back to you and you see it. You see the page with all its forms and all its programs and all that stuff. The question is, if the creator of the web page, who's going to be you now, wants to write a program, like taking 5 numbers, tell me what's the biggest number, any program at all, where should that program run? Because a computer program has to run on a computer. Where should it run? should it run on this machine, which we're going to call the server? Should it run on the server machine, or should it run on your machine, which we're gonna call the client? So a server is a machine that many, many people go to looking for something, and then the results get sent back to all the different clients. Where should if you're gonna write a program, so you're the person creating either the JavaScript or the PHP program, where would you want the program to run? Would you want it to run on your machine, or do you want it to run on the receiver's machine? Anyone think of an answer? So there's three answers. It should run on the client, it should run on the server, or what would be a third answer? Not both, but
Runs on the webpage.
it depends on the webpage?
I said it runs on the webpage.
Well, okay, but so the thing is this, when you go out to the server to get when you go out to the server to get a web page, and the web page has now instructions in it to run a program, should the program run here and then when it's finished, send the results back, or should it send the program back to here and let the program run on your machine?
Yeah, that one.
Always? Well, what's the advantage to doing that? In other words, you have some steps you want to do. You'd rather send it, you being the Facebook person, not the Facebook customer, you'd rather send the code to the person over here and let it run on their machine. What's the advantage of doing that?
Does it take up space on your computer?
It doesn't take up time.
Okay.
Okay, so in other words, if you're like Facebook and there's 10 million people logging in, if you can shoot out 10 million programs and let them run on their machine, your machine's pretty open for more people to log in, right? If it was all running on your machine, you might get clogged up. So the advantage to sending it out to the client is less work for the server. One downside is the client has to know JavaScript. Have you ever gone to a web page? You probably haven't gotten this in a while, but maybe a few years ago. You went to a web page and it said, error, you don't have JavaScript running. Did you ever get that? Okay.
Error.
And then it says, hit this button to download JavaScript. What that means is the server sent you some JavaScript stuff and your computer, it might have been when you first bought it or it was old, doesn't understand JavaScript. So you hit some button and it downloaded it, now it can understand it. So it's required that the receiver understands JavaScript. If you write a JavaScript program here and send it out here, it's required that they know it. So it's kind of a good idea to push all the work out to the client. It's less work for the server. Is there any reason why you would want the program to run on the server? Anyone think of? So I'll kind of give you a hint. When you log into Facebook, you type in your email address and your password. And then you hit a button. That button runs a program. And the program reads the password you typed in, plus it goes out to the database and pulls out the password that you said you had yesterday. And it says, if they match, I'm going to let you in, and if they don't match, I'm not going to let you in. Where should that program run? Why on the server?
Not everybody gets your information.
No one will, yeah, you don't want to send the password from the database out to this person and then have this person do view source and see the password, right? So it'd be kind of nice if there were two types of programs. Ones that run on the client and ones that, if you need to, run on the server. And that's what was happening with the PHP thing. The program, that block that said, we had a block that said $PHP, and then blah, blah, blah. We had a program, and then we said end of PHP. And everything that was in here, we could have said, if $password equals the $, the entered password, then let this person log in, otherwise don't let this person log in, but we don't want anybody to see this. So the PHP style code So programming languages like PHP and ASP and JSP, these programs run on the server. And what happens is the server, before it even sends you the results, the server will remove all of this, will pull it out of the code, and then replace it with whatever results you want. So you only see the results. That's why all we saw was the line that said, biggest number is 854. The biggest number is 854. We did not see the program because the server ran the program, removed it, and just filled in the answers. And sometimes we want that. For example, passwords. Sometimes we want that. But a lot of times we don't want it. We don't want to just clutter up the server with too much stuff. So an example of something that you would do client-side programming is, have you ever seen a web page that, like the Monmouth web page? You know, in the Monmouth web page, there's a picture comes up, then a few seconds later it slides over and another picture comes up. That's a program running. Anything that you're not just seeing something standing still means a program's running. So Monmouth sends the web page out, plus sends, let's say, 5 pictures out to you, and then a program running JavaScript will run on your machine saying, display the first picture, count to 10, display the next picture, count to 10, display the next picture, and keep doing that. If we did that on the server side, what would we have to do? We would have to send the page out to you with 1 picture, then run a program over here counting to 10. We'd have to remember who you are and then send you another picture, and it would keep clicking every time there's an update. Have you ever gone to a web page where you bring up the web page, you're not touching anything, and every 10 seconds it clicks and something changes? You ever had that happen? It's just clicking on its own. So something like that is happening. The server, it has some timer running. The program's running on the server and then it's sending out a new update and you're not even doing anything with it. But if you wanted to create a web page that has some pictures and the pictures are moving around, it's probably better to pick a client-side programming language like JavaScript, which you code up the program here, but you just send it to them and let it run on their machine. Other times it's important that the program run on your machine. So let me give an example. I'm going to learn how to turn this thing back on. And let's okay. So I just want to show you one example that you've seen 1,000 times, but it'll look different now. So if I go to log into Facebook, and let's say I'll type in a bad password, the username and password. So I'll log in as Snooki. Snooki at jerseyshore.com. Okay. So you can't really see it, but anyway, I'm going to hit this button. That's going to run a program that reads these 2 inputs. It's going to check with a server out in California to see if this user exists and this is the correct password, and then it's going to somehow send some results back. So run the program, and the result is we go to a different web page. This is the result of the program. We go to a web page called login.php, and then this question mark ends up meaning a parameter is being sent to us saying you've already attempted one more time. Now it's asking for another one. So maybe they keep some counter. If you attempted 5 times and fail, they'll close the account or something like that. But this is the result of that last program. When I hit that button, was it sent us to this web page, which is a PHP page, which means it's ready to run yet another program. So you hit this button, it'll run another program. So that's all. I just wanted to show you a real example of something you've seen before. where this is actually a PHP page. So this program, if I now type in another password and hit this button, it's going to run a PHP program, which means it's running on the server side, which makes sense. You don't want to pass passwords out to the user and then they do view source and see everybody's password. So if this ended in ASP or PHP or JSP, have you seen other websites where the web page ends in ASP or JSP? Same thing. It's like PHP. It's a program running on the server, and then when it's done, it only sends you the results. JavaScript runs on your machine, which means you get to see everything that's input. So hopefully, it's not something too important that they're sending out to you. It's just like 3 pictures that you've already had. It's just scrolling through them.